Before there was a wedding at Windsor Castle. Before there was an Oprah interview seen by 50 million people. Before there was Netflix, Archwell, or a lifestyle brand with a $64 candle. There was a woman at a dinner table in London in 2013 reportedly asking to be introduced to a famous footballer before the drinks were finished. That detail, small, specific, and by now widely reported across multiple outlets, is the one Tom Bauer keeps returning to, not because it is the most explosive claim in his account of Meghan Markle's life before Harry, but because he argues it reveals a pattern that runs through everything that followed, and it is the pattern more than any individual story that makes this particular chapter of the Sussex saga worth examining carefully and at length. That she was hunting for a man in England from 2013 onwards when her marriage had crashed and she couldn't find anyone in Canada at the time. And she wanted wealth and she wanted fame. Tonight we're going through the full pre-Harry picture as Bauer and others have documented it. The footballer she allegedly asked about within minutes of meeting a mutual contact. The pop stars who allegedly did not reply to her messages. The chef she was reportedly still living with when Harry entered the picture. The Piers Morgan story that has never stopped generating headlines. The career that was not quite what the official narrative later suggested. And the wider question of what the pre-royal years actually looked like underneath the carefully constructed version of events that was later presented to a global audience. Let's start with the dinner because that is where most accounts of this chapter begin. It was 2013. Meghan had just arrived in London. Her marriage to Trevor Engelson had ended by multiple accounts in a way that surprised people who knew the couple. Reports described the wedding ring being mailed back without a significant emotional goodbye, a detail that lodged in the memories of people who heard it and has been repeated in the coverage ever since. Cold, clean, and final. A marriage of 2 years concluded by these accounts, without the kind of drawn-out emotional processing most people associate with the end of something significant. She was hoping to have internet meetings with Howie Mandel. Mrs. Mandel got wind of this. She was in a new city making new connections, and according to the account that has since been told many times and across many different platforms, she was not wasting any time at all. At a dinner with Lizzie Cundy, the British television personality and socialite with connections across the UK, celebrity and sports world, Meghan allegedly asked fairly directly and fairly early in the evening to be introduced to Ashley Cole. Meghan is in a losing battle because there's a lot that is still going to come out about her. She definitely wants us to have a certain image of her, and she just doesn't want things that she's done in the past to come out. For context, Ashley Cole was at that point in 2013 one of the most recognizable footballers in England. He had played for Arsenal and Chelsea at the highest level, represented the England national team consistently, and generated enormous tabloid coverage over many years, not all of it about football. His personal life had been extensively and often painfully documented in the British press, and by 2013, he was a figure that most people in British celebrity circles were treating with some degree of caution in terms of public association. The attention around him was not the quiet, aspirational kind. Meghan, according to Lizzie Cundy's telling of the story, appeared to see opportunity rather than risk. Cundy reportedly declined to make the introduction, and she has spoken about that moment in interviews multiple times since. That refusal became, in Tom Bauer's retelling, the opening data point in a broader argument about how Meghan navigated social environments during this period. His claim is not that asking for an introduction is wrong. People network. Ambitious people in new cities reach for connections. People ask to meet famous people. His claim is that the speed, the directness, the specific target, and the consistent Repetition of this approach across multiple social situations reveals something specific about the operating logic. Trevor Engelson was very hesitant to put her forward for anything because Meghan was an embarrassment, no matter what she was put forward for and managed to get. She then tried to up the ante and turn it into something it wasn't. That every meeting had a purpose. Attached, every new contact was a potential door, and the social climbing was active, deliberate, and clearly goal-oriented rather than casual. Whether that reading is fair is genuinely debatable. Ambitious people in competitive industries network aggressively, and there's nothing inherently unusual about someone arriving in a new city and immediately trying to build connections. But Bauer keeps returning to this story because he believes the pattern it establishes, the purposeful approach, the clear goal attached to every social interaction, plays out consistently across everything that followed in the years before Harry appeared. St. Meghan Markle usually winging and moaning about the press. She's flown in from Canada and I wanted to be with my mates. I was like, no, I want to sit with my friends and have a giggle. He was like, no, look after her. But actually, we got on really well. And we did have a huge giggle, and she wanted to find an English boyfriend. So I said, look, I'll help you. So I was going through my phone. It was Ashley Cole, Chelsea football. If is giving you the full picture, that other channel skip, hit the like button. It helps us reach more people who want the real story. Now, let's talk about the pop stars because this is the part of the story that has generated the most online discussion. In 2015, by multiple accounts, Meghan was reportedly sending messages to British celebrities online. Two names come up consistently in the coverage: Matt Cardell and Max George. Matt Cardell won The X Factor in 2010. He had a chart-topping single, a recognizable face in the UK entertainment world, and a following that extended beyond the competition itself. According to accounts that have circulated widely in royal commentary and in Bauer's reporting, Meghan reached out saying she was a big fan and suggested meeting when she was next in London. It was a friendly, warm approach, the kind that is easy to receive positively and just as easy to let quietly lapse. Matt reportedly saw the messages, considered responding, and then, in the language of the digital age, did not follow through. No reply, no meeting, ghosted by a woman who would go on to marry into the British royal family and become one of the most discussed public figures on Earth. The irony of that sequence, as Bauer has noted and as royal commentators have pointed out many times since, is specific and hard to ignore. She knew exactly how to play, and as she, the point about Meghan is it's easy to dislike her, but the point about her is that in her own terms she is astonishing success. She came from nothing, not a very successful actress. She had no money. She had no future. After the Suits series in Canada, and suddenly she's an international star with quite a lot of money. And of course, in her terms, that's a great success. The same woman who would later be introduced to global audiences as a major Hollywood presence, a celebrated activist and philanthropist, and the Duchess of Sussex apparently could not, at that point in 2015, get a former X Factor winner to respond to her messages consistently. Max George from The Wanted tells a version of the same story. The Wanted were at that point a successful boy band with a significant fan base in both the UK and internationally, a genuinely prominent name in pop music. By Max's own later account, Meghan had been in contact, friendly, warm, complimentary about his work, with a familiar suggestion of meeting up. They exchanged some messages. It felt casual and not particularly significant to him. Nothing developed further. And then years later, when Meghan's face was suddenly everywhere in connection with Prince Harry, Max reportedly had the specific and somewhat startling realization that She had been the one messaging him several years before. The realization, wait, I know her, in the context of one of the most globally covered royal relationships of the era, became a story in itself. She always intended to go back to Hollywood and use her title to pursue her career, and they went there, and undoubtedly at the beginning it was absolutely brilliant. Tom Bower draws on these two stories together to make a point that he returns to repeatedly. Not that Meghan was doing something wrong by reaching out to celebrities, but that the distance between the public narrative constructed around a rise of a woman being pursued by the world, of connections arriving organically, of fame flowing naturally toward someone genuinely exceptional, and the documented pre-Harry years in which the outreach appears to have been going mostly in one direction is wider than the official story acknowledged. Subscribe to and drop your take in the comments below. And the people who were on her hit list included Max George from the boy band Wanted, the professional footballer at the time, Ashley Cole, and Matt Cardell, the former X Factor winner. So I'll get to all of that, but I think it's also sometimes very instructive, and I thank Princess Carpicle for the work finding these. Just taking a close look at the way that she appeared in the Med. Do you think Tom Bower's account is fair, or is he reading too much into normal networking behavior? Now to the detail that Bower has described as the most structurally significant in the pre-Harry timeline, the situation involving Corey Vitiello. Corey Vitiello was a respected and successful chef in Toronto's restaurant world, a genuine professional achievement in a competitive industry. By multiple published accounts, Meghan and Corey were in a serious relationship during her Suits years in Toronto. They were living together, building a shared life, and according to accounts from people who knew them during this period, Corey believed they were building a genuine future together, not a casual arrangement, not a relationship that was clearly winding down, but something with forward momentum. The timeline question that Bower and others have raised is this: when did the Corey Vitiello relationship formally end? And how does that date relate to the beginning of the Harry story? By multiple published accounts, Meghan and Harry's first meeting was arranged through mutual friends in the summer of 2016. The meeting was reportedly set up by a mutual contact who thought they might get along. By the accounts in the Netflix documentary and elsewhere, the connection was immediate and the relationship developed quickly from that point. Bower's argument is that the dates when Corey Vitiello understood the relationship to be ongoing and when Meghan was developing her connection with Harry do not fully separate in the way the official narrative suggested. He argues that when critics placed the available accounts side by side, the overlap became harder to square with the version of events that was publicly presented. Corey Vitiello has not spoken extensively on the record about the precise specifics, but the timeline question has never been definitively resolved in the public conversation. The reason Bower considers this important is not primarily about the morality of how a relationship ended. His argument is about the construction of a narrative. If the official story presented a clean break that preceded the Harry relationship and the documented timeline suggests the picture was more complicated than that, then the official story in Bower's framing is part of a broader pattern of selective presentation. The story that was told was the most useful story. Whether it was the most complete one is what he argues remains open. Now let's talk about Piers Morgan, because that story has generated its own entire ecosystem of commentary and shows no sign of stopping. Meghan and Piers Morgan first connected through social media by Piers' own telling, and he has told the story many times and in considerable detail. Meghan reached out with warm messages complimenting his work and suggesting they meet when she was in London. The approach was similar in character to the approaches Bower documents elsewhere: friendly, flattering, and oriented toward a meeting. Piers found her charming and Interesting. He agreed to meet. They met at a pub in Kensington for drinks and conversation, and by his account it was a genuinely good evening. Hours of easy conversation, real warmth between two people who seemed to be getting along. He left believing he had made a new celebrity friend in a genuine sense, not a transactional acquaintance, but someone who had been worth the time and who he assumed would remain in contact. By his own account, he was pleased about the connection. He found her smart and engaging. The friendship felt real to him in the moment. What happened next has become one of the most repeated stories in the Sussex commentary world. Meghan left that meeting and that same evening went to a blind date that had been arranged through mutual friends. The blind date was with Prince Harry. They met by multiple accounts. The chemistry was immediate and the connection was significant. And after that evening, according to Piers Morgan, Meghan stopped being in contact entirely. No follow-up messages, no maintaining of the friendship, no check-in of any kind. The person he had spent a generous amount of his evening talking to and toward whom he had formed a genuinely warm view had simply, and without any stated reason, stopped being in touch. Bauer identifies this as the same operating logic he traced at the Lizzie Cundy dinner and in the messages to Matt Cardell and Max George, playing out at a different scale and with a different target. In his telling, a connection is pursued with warmth and attention for as long as it serves a purpose. And when a more significant connection appears, the earlier one becomes irrelevant. Whether that is a pattern or whether it is an interpretation, Piers Morgan, who has spent the years since making his feelings about Meghan considerably and publicly clear, has constructed after the fact the audience can weigh for themselves. What is documented is the sequence of events, the pub, the evening, the same date, the silence that followed. Piers has spoken about it in interviews, on television, and in his published writing. He has never by any public account fully moved past it, and Bauer uses it as the clear single illustration of the pattern he argues runs through the entire pre-Harry chapter. Now let's zoom out and look at what Bauer is actually arguing with all of this material, because the individual stories are interesting, but the cumulative argument is the thing worth examining carefully. His core claim is that the public was presented with a specific and carefully constructed version of Meghan Markle's rise. Organic, authentic, pursued rather than pursuing. A woman whose fame and connections arrived because the world recognized something genuine and exceptional in her. And his argument is that the pre-royal years, when you look at the documented accounts rather than the officially presented narrative, tell a measurably different story. The difference in Bauer's framing is not between a good person and a bad person. It is between a presented story and a documented one, between the version of events that was shaped for public consumption and the version that the named sources, the contested timelines, and the specific interactions suggest actually took place. A story of active and deliberate social climbing, of networking with clear goals attached to each interaction, of relationships that were left behind when better connections appeared, and of a career that had reached a ceiling that the official narrative significantly obscured. On the career specifically, Bauer is blunt in a way that has generated significant push back. Meghan's role in Suits gave her visibility, a regular income, and a comfortable professional life in Toronto. It was a well-regulated cable drama with a loyal audience that ran for 9 seasons and gave Meghan a consistent professional platform. But Bauer is direct about where that placed her in the actual Hollywood hierarchy. Not A-list, not close to A-list, and not on a clear trajectory toward the kind of breakthrough roles that transform cable television actors into genuinely global stars. He notes that she had access to professional connections that most struggling actors would never have. Family members with industry credits, networks built over years of working in television. And yet, by his account, None of those connections had translated into the level of career success that the post-royal narrative implied she had been on the verge of when Harry appeared. The picture painted in certain profiles and interviews of a woman just about to break through to major Hollywood stardom was, in Bauer's assessment, a significant construction built around what the narrative required, rather than what the career trajectory actually demonstrated. There's also the deal or no deal chapter, which Bauer and other critics have returned to repeatedly. Before Suits, Meghan appeared on the game show as one of the briefcase models, a professional job in television that paid and provided exposure, but one that does not quite align with the retrospective account of a serious actress building steadily toward major breakthrough work. Meghan has spoken about her own feelings of objectification during that period, but critics note that the way the deal or no deal years were subsequently framed as a humiliating detour from a more serious path conflicts with the timeline of how those years actually fit into the career. It was by every available account simply a job in television. The interpretation of it as something other than that came later. Whether that assessment is accurate, fair, or simply the product of a critical biographer working from a preformed conclusion is something the audience has to weigh. Meghan supporters argue consistently that her career was solid and growing, that she was building something real, and that the Bauer account is shaped by the sources who agreed to talk to him, sources who by definition are unlikely to be neutral. That is a fair challenge to the methodology of critical biography, and it applies to Bauer's work specifically, but the sources Bauer uses for the individual pre-Harry stories are in most cases named. Lizzie Cundy has spoken about the dinner on record. Mac Cardell's account of the messages exists in published form. Max George's recollection is documented. Piers Morgan's account of the pub evening is one of the most extensively told stories in royal commentary. The pattern Bauer constructs from these named accounts is his interpretation. The accounts themselves are not anonymous. In 2026, with the Sussex operation under the kind of commercial and reputational pressure that multiple commentators have documented in detail, the Invictus financial questions, the brand performance, the Project Thaw debates, the celebrity silence, the pre-Harry years are circulating again with renewed intensity in royal commentary circles. The gap between the origin story that was publicly told and the one that the documented record suggests is being examined with more scrutiny than at any previous point. Whether that scrutiny changes anything for the people who formed their views during the height of Sussex sympathy in 2021 and 2022 is a different question, but for the audience, that is still placing events side by side and asking whether the official version and the available evidence fully match. The pre-Harry chapter offers a specific and sourced set of data points that the official story has never fully addressed. The dinner in 2013, the messages in 2015, the timeline in 2016, the pub in Kensington that same evening. 4 documented moments, multiple named sources, 1 sustained argument from Tom Bauer that the story you were sold and the story that is supported by the evidence are not entirely the same. That argument has been in circulation since Bauer's biography was published, has never been fully resolved, and has never been adequately addressed by the other side in a form that accounts for the named sources. Meghan has rejected it. Her supporters have challenged the methodology and the sources, and yet the individual stories, the named accounts, the documented sequences have not disappeared from the public conversation. They keep resurfacing whenever the Sussex brand faces commercial or reputational pressure, because they offer a specific and alternative origin story to the one that was carefully crafted and presented. In 2026, with the Sussex operation navigating the accumulated weight of the Invictus financial questions, the scaled-back Netflix relationship, the brand performance that has fallen below early expectations, and the reported Spencer veto on the Diana anniversary project, the pre-Harry years feel more relevant than they have at any point since the original royal departure, because the questions being asked about the Sussex brand now about authenticity, about the gap between the presented version and the documented version, about who is pursuing whom and to what end, are exactly the questions. Bauer's pre-Harry chapter was built around people who formed their opinions in 2021 during the Oprah interview, and the immediate sympathy wave that followed are unlikely to change their minds based on a series of 2015 pop star messages and a contested 2016 timeline. That is simply how opinion formation works at scale. The emotional frame, established at the peak of Sussex, sympathy is durable, well-ended, and resistant to revision by smaller scale counter-narratives. That does not make it accurate. It makes it powerful. And that durability is itself part of what Bauer is arguing about. He would say that the reason the emotional frame is so durable is precisely because it was constructed carefully and presented at a moment of maximum sympathy with minimum opportunity for the alternative version to be heard at comparable scale. The Oprah interview reached an audience of 50 million people. The critical biographies reach a considerably smaller one. The architecture of the public narrative was built at a scale that the corrections and the contested accounts have never quite matched. That asymmetry between the scale at which the carefully constructed narrative was launched and the scale at which the alternative accounts have since been documented is the context in which the pre-Harry chapter sits in 2026. Not as a revelation that overturns everything, but as a documented alternative that has always been there, has always been on the record, and has always asked the same question. Is the story you were told the full story of what actually happened? But the audience that watches this channel, the audience that has been following the documented evidence rather than the constructed narrative, the one that places events side by side rather than simply accepting the official framing, already knows that the pre-Harry chapter looks considerably different from the version that was sold to the world in 2021. Bauer named the pattern. The named sources documented it. And the pattern he identified, the dinner in 2013, the messages in 2015, the timeline in 2016, the pub on the same evening, is what it is, regardless of what the official story chose to emphasize and what it chose to leave out. The pre-Harry years are the foundation on which everything that followed was built. They are the ground floor of the entire Sussex story, the part that was least visible at the time, most carefully shaped in retrospect, and most worth examining now, understanding them carefully, not through the lens of the biographer who opposes her, and not through the lens of the advocates who support her, but through the specific and documented accounts of named people who were there, is how you actually understand the Sussex story, rather than simply choosing the version that the largest platform presented most loudly. Tom Bauer spent years building an argument from named sources. The question is whether the argument holds, whether the pattern is real, or whether the events that make up that pattern have simpler explanations when you look at them individually rather than in sequence. That is a genuinely interesting question to sit with, and it is one the Sussex story, in all its years of public coverage, has never fully or satisfactorily answered. Which part of this pre-Harry picture do you find most significant, and do you think Bauer's reading of the pattern is the right one? Or is he connecting dots that do not actually connect? Drop your take below. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. And if this kind of analysis is what you come here for, the like button is how we reach more people who want it. See you in the next one.